Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba, back once again, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we can gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Before we get started, I want you to make sure you hit the subscribe and like button, and we're going to jump right in where we're talking about how to celebrate African Freedom Fighters Day. I think this is rather important for a multitude of reasons. One, many people, unfortunately, may not be aware that April 20th is a holiday. We're not talking about 420 where people are going out and getting blazed, right? But April 20th is African Freedom Fighters Day. And it's a day in which that's dedicated to recognizing and honoring African ancestors who have dedicated themselves to the work of liberation and freedom of African people. But before we really dive into what is African Freedom Fighters Day, why it was on April 20th, I think it's very important that we understand that according to our Queen Mother and esteemed ancestor, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she talks about how we as African people, we have to engage in with anti-Blackness in all 11 areas of human activity. And as a result, some of those areas are educationally, psychologically, and of course, sociologically, right? So we know educationally, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, a great ancestor who created the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, known as ASALH. If you're not a member of ASALH, make sure you go online, and look up your local branch of ASALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. But he talks about miseducation and how Black people are taught to actually have a disdain for not only themselves, but who and where they come from. As a result, want to emulate whites, so on and so forth, and that engages in what self-hatred. We know from a psychological standpoint, we look at the Association of Black Psychologists, some of the great work of Dr. Naeem Akbar in his book, Breaking the Psychological Chains of Slavery, where he talks about his theories on alien self-disorder and anti-self-disorder, and some of the reasons why African people tend to engage in racially disempowering, self-defeating, and self-destructive behavior. We're going to talk about the work of Dr. K.K. Cabone, cultural misorientation, right, and how sometimes we are even from a cultural standpoint engaging in activities and behavior that serves in the better interest of others rather than ourselves. Then, of course, we even have from a sociological standpoint where we look at the great work of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois in his seminal text Souls of Black Folk, which was, of course, written in 1903, where he talks about this sense of double consciousness, right, in which we're viewing the world through the eyes of others. And of course, from a sociological standpoint, just from a pragmatic standpoint, from a common sense standpoint, we know that viewing the world through the eyes of someone else is extremely problematic, right? So of course, when we dive in, when we lean in to betting on Black, we know that we want to view the world from the eyes of ourselves. That even though those of us who are in the deaf and decadence of the Western diaspora, even though we are physically removed from our ancestral homeland, that doesn't mean that we can't be culturally, spiritually, if you're into that, psychologically, sociologically, and most importantly, educationally connected to our cultural homeland, our ancestral homeland. This is something that the late, great El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X, articulated very clearly in the charter to the Organization of African American Unity. Those of you who do not know, the charter was co-written by, of course, our late, great ancestor, Dr. John Henry Clark, who was a mentor of Malcolm X. So if you don't know, if you ever get a chance, please get this seminal text, Modern Black Nationalism, from Marcus Garvey to Louis Farrakhan. And one of the chapters in here actually details and covers the Organization of African American Unity's charter that Malcolm X wrote. As a matter of fact, I may need to do a video on the Organization of African American Unity's 5-point plan. We know the Black Panther Party had a 10-point plan, but they have a 5-point plan of what they needed to do. And I think that's what I'm going to do in celebrating Malcolm X's birthday coming up, of course, on May 19th. Now, with that being said, before we dive in and truly get into African freedom fighters, I think it's also very important. We know that many people feel a certain way about Elijah Muhammad, but I'm going to evoke some of the wisdom of Elijah Muhammad when he stated that if you're going to tell Black people not to emulate whites, you have to give them an alternative, right? So I know a lot of people in the so-called conscious community or woke community, whatever the hell that means, tend to articulate or elucidate that they have a problem celebrating these European Western holidays. And I get it, right? Some of the sociology that takes place kind of gets us to identify more as American than what we truly are, which is African. And we know that could be problematic for a variety of reasons. And so with that being said, I think it's very important that we celebrate ourselves. Part of having your own culture is what self-celebration. Anyone who's ever studied anthropology or cultural anthropology can speak to that. So we're going to get right into it. I know a lot of times people have a belief that Black holidays have been created arbitrarily. There's no really rhyme or reason into why these Black holidays were created. We know that that's simply not the case. We know we hear this a lot when we're talking about Kwanzaa, but we know that that's nothing but a culture form of anti-Blackness, anti-Black racism. So with that being said, we know historically, we talk about give the historical background for African Freedom Fighters Day. African people have a long and glorious history of struggle and successful resistance. The key word is successful resistance to, of course, foreign hegemony or alien hegemony, because we know white people are the only people who have oppressed African people throughout the history of the world and even in contemporary times. This history and these people deserve honor and recognition. Traditionally, we held festivals celebrating our victories and our heroes and our warriors. April 20th was chosen because on this day in 1853, keyword on this day in 1853, Harriet Tubman began her work as a conductor on the Underground Railroad. So once again, April 20th, 1853 is when Queen Mother Harriet Tubman, our esteemed ancestor, warrior queen, Harriet Tubman began her work on the Underground Railroad, and this is why April 20th is chosen as the date to celebrate African Freedom Fighters Day. So with that being said, I would recommend, this is some of the training I've received on how to properly celebrate African Freedom Fighters Day, is to adorn the home in red, black, and green. We know red, black, and green, the flag that was given to us by the late, great Marcus Messiah Garvey, progenitor of UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association, back in August of 1920. The red represents the blood, the black, of course, the people, and the green, of course, the land and the material resources and wealth of the African continent. And that there should be a belief that the home should be adorned with red, black, and green, and that throughout the home and in the windows, there should be pictures to honor our freedom fighters. Anyone who knows me, if you come throughout my home, my home was adorned with our great ancestors who fought with dignity for African agency at home and abroad. Also, you can have a table set up. This is known as an altar. I know many people, when they think of an altar, they think of something religious. But in African culture, that's really not the case. It's not a situation where we're worshiping our ancestors. It's a situation in which we're honoring our ancestors, right? If you think, even here in America, you have the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Memorial. You have memorials to the soldiers in the Korean War, the Vietnam War, World War II, so on and so forth. There's in a sense of worshiping. It's a sense of honoring those who came before, and of course, made the ultimate sacrifice for African redemption at home and abroad. So you have a white cloth, the makeka, which of course is the straw mat used during the Kwanzaa celebration. Pictures could be set up, other freedom fighters. You have the Kanara, the Mushima Saba, which of course is the seven candles, and then the Kukumbe Cha Umoja, which of course is the unity cup, which is representative of that foundational principle of the Nguzo Saba, which is unity, to strive for and maintain unity in our family, community, nation, and race. With that being said, at some point you could have a candle, you could light a candle in the home, and when lighting a candle, one would say, on this day we honor our freedom fighter, Harriet Tubman, who made her first perilous and courageous trip as a conductor on the Underground Railroad. On behalf of our people, we light this candle to honor all our freedom fighters, whose valor and courage is a shining example to us and future generations. We light this candle to honor them and evoke the same courage in ourselves. And we all say, Ashe. The candle then is lit and allowed to burn for the remainder of the day. This celebration can end with discussions and activities with the family, in which we can watch even some movies. We know Hollywood tends to fudge the historical accuracy of these movies, so I don't know about that. But we could look at photos, storytelling can be engaged, or we can even read some literature out loud to the family about our ancestors, about our African freedom fighters who made oftentimes the ultimate sacrifice in the quest for African redemption. And I think it's very important that we take time throughout the year to honor and celebrate ourselves rather than simply seeking to emulate the dominant culture and be the cultural children of the world. Until next time, y'all know what to do. Always bet on black. Don't forget to hit the subscribe and like button. Peace.